All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
And hello all, welcome. This is the show of record. I am Mark and I'm joined by my elite squad. If there was a SEAL Team 6 of YouTube shows, this would be the crew. You've got Albert also known as the commissioner.
Albert, thank you.
Yeah, because we actually, when it comes to sports, turn to Albert. And there is a sports / business / broadcast / YouTube controversy that I will ask the commissioner to report on today.
Albert, thank you.
So I will turn to you, Albert, on that and maybe one other story. Kim is here.
Kim, how are you?
Fresh off the Nikki Maduro
Kim, how are
show,
you?
which I enjoy very much, and I recommend it to all of my boys and girls who are tuning in. By the way, speaking of boys and girls of all ages, I have a story for older boys and girls today. You know, I love my older boys and girls, and I will take care of you on this show. And there is something that I think you're going to find relatable, and it's not just for older boys and girls. The Gen Zs are jumping on this too, and I'll tell you all about that. The thing that we will do that I suspect you await anxiously on Thursdays is talk to David Katz. He is the former federal prosecutor, great analyst when it comes to the law. You'll hear him on London radio. He is used by media outlets across the country, Fox 5 in New York, CBS in Los Angeles. He's just really one of these guys who, well, the landscape of broadcasters and other, there he is. That's his, they can't get enough of him. That's the the artist's depiction. One of our viewers put this together. That's Nostradamus and David Katz merged in a mashup, Katzadamus. So because his predictions are eerily accurate, so we'll get to that. I got an email. I like to, whenever I get hostile comments or emails, I share them.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Yeah, because they cut right through to my soul, you know. And this one was a quick comment. You can actually see it if you go into our comments. And I encourage you to see videos we've dropped, and you can leave comments yourself, nasty or otherwise. And this one was correct. And that's why I want to read it.
Oh.
Yeah, I agree with it. Oh,
no, says Russ. It's mailbag time. Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
It was like one line, and it's the way she wrote it. And I agree with her, actually. So, oh, damn it, Albert. I can't find it. I was going to send it to you.
The Surface Spins writes, I love you guys, but I'm here for David Katz.
Yeah, I don't blame you. They come for David Katz, and they just power through everything else.
I love that as a segment, though. Good alliteration. Mark's mailbag.
Yeah,
Mark's
we
mailbag.
need, I'll tell you what we do need to do. You know, since we can't meet as a group annemore because Kim does a show before, she does a show after.
Blame
It's
it
really
on
Kim's
me.
fault. Yeah,
Yeah.
Kim's the reason we can't meet. And
I was trying to cobble together a YouTube living. That's what I got to say.
Well, I'm just saying the casualty of that living is that we can't have any staff meetings. But the point I'm trying to make is that I have a suggestion, and now that I have everybody together for this brief instant, I think we should have Albert, and this is particularly pertinent given the fact that they've moved the studio thing, so now I can't even see the comments at all. But Tony's coming up later to move it. If you can just highlight comments that I should respond to, we should set aside time every show, if possible, to read comments.
Yeah.
Okay? Albert, can you do this? Can you help with
love
this?
that. Yep.
Okay. So
Albert, thank you.
I'll get some production element going also, but I really need you and Kim to set aside those comments. You just need to star them, and I will respond to anything. And you know, I'm not afraid of hostile comments. So if they're critical, I don't mind. Just include them, please. The wasn't a hostile comment, but this woman said, "Oh my God, your hair is too dark." That was the comment, and
Your
that
hair
literally
is-
was. And
your
it
hair
is
is
too.
dark?
It is too dark. Well,
What?
It is too dark. She's right. Here's what happens. I get the hair colored, and it comes out like Liberace dark. Okay, it's
Right.
very dark. It's Desi Arnaz dark. Okay. Mark, could you make a reference from the last 10 years as opposed to?
It looks like it's got a little red to it.
Well, what happens then is you begin washing it, and you want to try to bring this super dark, unnatural color to some kind of color spectrum that seems human-like, okay?
Yeah.
So normally in radio, I don't worry about it. I'll wear a hat, whatever, and then when the hair gets to a color that I'm feeling is acceptable in the general public, then I'll take the hat off or whatever it may be.
Sure.
But now I suffer the scrutiny and criticism of my audience on my own show. And the other thing that I might mention is we stepped up in relation to a request from listeners to go to this 1080p thing. So now you see the hair color in a more, you get what I'm saying, Kim?
They do
Yeah,
this
I
to
do.
me all the time. I don't know what
Trust
the hell they do
me.
it for.
Yeah.
Why
If
are
I
you
could-
yelling?
Yeah.
If I could just go back to the picture and not the video, I would.
Oh, exactly. I would, if it were audio only, it would favor us enormously. But that's what's happening. I agree with you. I'll try to lighten the hair color from now on, if that'll make you happy. Sorry
Oh my
about that.
goodness. You look fine. Don't even worry about it.
The other thing I got a comment, Mark, you do yell too much. Stop yelling. It turns me
Oh.
off. Yeah. Well, sometimes I'm yelling. You guys know why I'm yelling. Okay, let's let's not get too tough, guys. Come on now.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I like that people take ownership of the show, though. That's cool. All right. In addition to David Katz, I do want to get to the United Airlines story. The latest United Airlines jet forced now to make an emergency landing after a door light started flashing. But it is not a Boeing flight. I believe that was an Airbus, wasn't it, Albert?
It was.
Yeah, there you go. Kim just got it. My darling Chris Christie has left the race. I don't think any of us will forget where we were when we heard the news that Chris Christie is out of the race.
What?
Yeah, he's gone. He's gone to that big breakfast buffet in the sky.
What?
Not in the sky, in the sky box, where you can now enjoy sporting events and other stuff as opposed to having to show up to all of these, lunches, breakfasts. To be fair to him, it's pretty hard to maintain any diet when you're campaigning for president because you have to attend all of these, prayer breakfasts and the morning breakfast. Really, most campaign events have some food element, and this poor man is trying to, shed a few pounds. It's very, very hard. He did take a shot, Chris Christie did, at the other leaders in the field, those who were involved in that debate last night. Didn't he, Albert? Do you have the what he said, or Kim, do you have it? It's the hot mic moment that Chris Christie had.
Let me pull it up. I need to describe it real quick.
Yeah, Chris Christie is a Jersey kid. He was governor of New Jersey. He speaks quite frankly. He was the attack dog, essentially, going after Donald Trump. But when you hear him in a hot mic moment, essentially size up the other two, it's pretty rich. Didn't you think so, Kim?
I thought it was great. And
Yeah.
it's so honest and, kind of a peek into what he really thinks versus what he can really say.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't know how much that Nikki Haley had spent on TV ads, so we learned about that. And he thinks that she's going to get, quote, smoked by Trump in the election. So, yeah, here it is.
Here we go.
She's going to get smoked, and you and I both know it. She's not up to
Because
this.
she hasn't even been.
She's still 20 points behind Trump in New Hampshire, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And he's still going to carry Iowa, right?
Yes. Always. I talked to DeSantis, called me petrified that I would.
He's probably getting out after Iowa.
Well,
That was it. But that was revealing. Really revealing.
Mm-hmm.
I just revealing Kim says, the frankness of it,
Right.
And Christie just couldn't keep it going. And Christie was the only one who was out in front criticizing Trump. There are a lot of people, I suggest, or maybe they're not a lot, but there are a few people who are in that Republican camp. And they are making their bones now on going up against Trump and, kind of calling him out for what he is. And Christie was, I thought, the loudest and probably the most effective in terms of handling media. He's very skilled at media. He's very good. He was on ABC for a long time. I'll probably go back to ABC as an analyst. But Chris Christie is not someone you want in power. Chris Christie is someone, and I'm making a point about Chris Christie to make a broader point, that even as he calls balls and strikes on Trump, his policies probably run afoul of a lot of things that you care about, if you care about things like the environment, for example. And I would give you another example, Liz Cheney, who is being feted by everyone on the left like she's, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. That's what that is. So she's the enemy of Trump. You're the enemy of Trump. And so somehow you feel, oh, she's my friend. Liz Cheney has toxic politics. She is against a woman's right to choose. Mm-hmm. She is, with a strong militant stance against a woman's reproductive rights. That's just the head of that parade. I think on a policy basis, you would be very disappointed with Liz Cheney. I get it. She lined up against Donald Trump, but that's the end of that. Nonetheless, she's being, very well received by everyone on the left. I think even in our chat at one point, this is a few months ago, it was suggested, why not put Biden on the ticket with Liz Cheney? I'm thinking, are you kidding me? You guys have lost your way.
They're not working for the same goals there. No.
Yeah. You've become so singularly minded in wanting to defeat Trump that you're not paying attention to the rest of who this person is. So, but anyway, that's the field. Christie is no longer part of it. And it's on to the other two who are still very much relevant. I suspect not so much in Iowa, but maybe in New Hampshire. Albert, you have a little bit from that debate last night, or from the appearance that they both made on CNN. So this is Ron DeSantis and Nikki Haley asked a question, was Haley, about the claim that, Donald Trump, essentially asking about Donald Trump's claims and how she feels about it vis-a-vis the Constitution. Here is
both of you talk about how important it is to protect the U.S. Constitution. 2 years after losing the 2020 election, Donald Trump wrote on social media about his baseless election lies, quote, "A massive fraud of this type and magnitude allows for the termination of all rules, regulations, and articles, even those found in the Constitution," unquote. On that subject, former Vice President Mike Pence has said that on January 6, 2021, Donald Trump put himself over the Constitution. Governor Haley, is there any meaningful difference in how you and Donald Trump view the Constitution?
Look, you take an oath to the Constitution, and I think what you're seeing is Donald Trump basically said that the election was stolen. He went on and on talking about the election being stolen. He said that January 6th was a beautiful day. I think January 6th was a terrible day, and we should never want to see that happen again. And I think we have to always be strong on the fact that, look, we want fair elections, and we saw some discrepancies in those elections in 2020 that should be concerning. That's why I passed voter ID in South Carolina. That's why I think when absentee ballots go out, you should be able to verify signatures. That's why I think ballots need to be counted on election day, and you should get results on election day. But that election, Trump lost it. Biden won that election. And the idea that he's gone and carried this out forever to the point that he's going to continue to say these things to scare the American people are wrong. We've seen a lot of states come together and do more election integrity bills. We need to do more than that. We still have 3 or 4 states that I'm worried about that don't have that. But at the end of the day, I will always defend and fight for the Constitution. That's what we should do as Americans. I think what happened on January 6th was a terrible day, and I think President Trump will have to answer for it.
So just a clarification, Governor. Is there any meaningful difference in how you and Donald Trump view the Constitution?
Well, I mean, I think that he says January 6th was a beautiful day. I don't think it was a beautiful day. I think you look at that. He thinks that he could go and bring in the fact that he wanted to change what the states did, the fact that he wanted to overturn the elections in D.C., those votes happen at the state level. You don't ever allow in D.C. for those votes to be changed at the federal level.
Governor.
States' rights matter.
Thank you, Governor. Governor DeSantis, is there any meaningful difference in how you and Donald Trump view the Constitution?
My role model for how to do the Constitution is George Washington. He said, the Constitution is the guide that I will never abandon. And I remember when I took an oath to be an officer in the U.S. Navy, you raise that hand, you put that left hand on the Bible. And it's interesting, the oath doesn't say that you're going to defend the shores of the United States or engage in military conflict. The oath simply says that you will support and defend the Constitution of the United States. As President of the United States, you will preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. You can't just terminate the Constitution. I mean, I know he does, word vomit from time to time on social media, but obviously I will uphold the Constitution. And I think it's fine to criticize Donald Trump, and I know the media brings this up a lot. But you know who else deserves to be criticized? The people that violated the Constitution during COVID to lock people out of schools, to destroy businesses, to force masks on people, to try to force vaccines. I'm going to bring a reckoning to all these agencies, the CDC, the NIH, the FDA. They harm people in this country. And when Dr. Fauci said there was no learning loss for kids, that's a disgrace.
Thank you, Governor.
There's a reckoning coming.
So let's talk about how you view the powers of the president.
That's great. Thank you, Albert. There's a reckoning coming becomes a repetitive theme. I would say a couple of things. First of all, that's a very skilled politician in Ron DeSantis. I don't believe he has a chance to win the presidency. He was he was the great white hope of the GOP. He was the Trump slayer, yet he represented hard right-wing politics. Listen to him on COVID mandates, on a woman's right to choose, women's reproductive rights. He is right behind the most intense reproductive legislation limiting a woman's right to choose. But he hasn't moved the meter, largely because he's not a charismatic figure. We really respond to a lot of these politicians on a visceral level. Then visceral's a ding word.
He started off so well, with talking about the Constitution and preserve, protect, and defend, and his naval service. He really, he started off so strong, and then it devolved into Wackoville.
Well, actually, what I was going to say is that, and this is the skilled politician part, he pivoted, I thought, well in that answer. I mean, again, when I'm talking well, I don't agree with what he's saying, but I'm just talking about his skill as a politician. He pivoted to mask mandates, which does land well with a lot of those primary voters. And he talked about government and big government. And then he mentioned Fauci, and he mentioned those recent comments that Fauci made about the closing of schools and keeping kids out of school. And that lands well also. Actually, that lands well across a spectrum of voters. So that was the Chris Christie part. Of course, Nikki Haley, she does full-throatedly, to use the oft-used phrase, come out against Trump on the J6 stuff. But then she talks about there were irregularities in the last election. She's trying to keep the door open for those who sort of want to believe that lie. There were no glaring irregularities in the last election. There weren't. That was one of the most reviewed and examined elections in U.S. history.
How many court cases? There were hundreds of court cases.
But she has to say that again to leave the door open for, hey, and all of you people who want to believe that crap, I'm ready to keep repeating that crap for a while for you. So she did that. And then she continues in other ways that I think just really reflect her emptiness as a candidate. And that said, she's now the new darling, and she's getting a lot of institutional money. I talk about the Koch brothers' money, et cetera. The finances associated with the right, institutional financing, now flowing to Haley, and she is up in New Hampshire. She's within 10 points of Donald Trump in New Hampshire. But the Iowa thing looks to be going to Trump in a cakewalk. I mean, there have been surprises in Iowa before. Was it George Bush, who was expected to be, this is back in the 80s, I want to say 82 maybe? He was expected to be the winner in Iowa in whatever the primary year was. And I believe, I forget who took that, but was it Rick Santorum or someone like that? It wasn't Santorum. But there have been a lot of upsets not a lot, there have been a handful of upsets in Iowa. I'm talking about from people who were not even moving the meter polling-wise within days of the primary. So sort of a similar situation to this. But this really does look to be a Donald Trump win. New Hampshire next, and then South Carolina. She really has to win South Carolina. So that's what's happening, and that's what happened with that debate. That was one highlight, at least, on that debate.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I guess we're looking at, I was going to get Spencer Christian on. Maybe we'll get him on in the morning tomorrow. But just weather-wise in California, which is where this show is originating from, the atmospheric river thing where there's just a continuous flow of moisture that looks to be setting up again. And we've just endured a serious avalanche at Lake Tahoe. It was a half a football field's worth of snow, apparently, that came down a famous Lake Tahoe ski slope. It killed one person, injured another. This is just a half hour after the area opened for the season. In the first half hour, 66-year-old Kenneth Kidd, a resident of Point Reyes and the Truckee area, he died after the avalanche hit in an expert skiing and snowboarding area at the Palisades Tahoe Ski Resort. It's the old Squaw Valley, it used to be called. They were resort guests, Kidd and the injured person. 2 other people were caught in the avalanche, but apparently unhurt. It's a remarkable thing that this double black diamond advanced expert terrain, which is, really navigated by so few people relative to the rest of the ski population, was the place where this hit. It was estimated to be 150 feet wide and 10 feet deep, this avalanche. There is some video, I guess. I haven't seen the video, but most of the video is aftermath. As you might imagine, there weren't a lot of people up there to actually shoot the stuff as it was happening. But
I saw some video earlier, and it's basically the people that happen to be there frantically trying to dig out people that are trapped.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a chaotic scene, is what they said. So. That's a sad start to a ski season that's really not had much to celebrate because it's been a pretty slow snow start. But winter storms taking aim at the West Coast this week. Rain to the North Coast and Bay Area. Heavy snow to the Sierra. And another storm expected to arrive this weekend after a break from wet weather, says the Chronicle, San Francisco Chronicle. Thursday, they say skies will be clear. That's today. And a frost advisory in effect until 10 a.m. It's already 11:30 here on the West Coast, so I guess that's expired. Anyway, that's your deal on a fairly eventful happening at Palisades Tahoe. Wow. There was, Albert, I realize now I may be doing things out of order.
Uh-oh.
But
it is your show, Mark. Feel free to do whatever you
Thank you. I don't know what if I've gotten criticism again about yelling too much or
The Mark Thompson Show.
Here we go. I like your hair color. I don't think it's too dark, says Johan. I love you, Johan. Johan. I always screw up her name. You're supposed to say the H in her name.
Johan, yeah.
Yeah, Johan. I want to say Johan, but it's not Johan. It's Johan.
Johan sounds like Johan.
Yeah, it also sounds, but you know why I want to do that? Because of the double N. I just want to sound
fancy.
But anyway, I want to sound fancy, but she's a big supporter of the show. So in a rich tradition that we have on this show, and we, to all of our supporters, we screw up their name. Johan, thank you. I adore you. Climate change is extreme weather events over time, says A Golf. Yeah. You yell exactly the right amount. Thank you, BA. Now, there is something I need the commissioner for. It's a major controversy. Then I will get to the story for older boys and girls, but Gen Z is very much a part of this too. So,
The Mark Thompson Show.
the thing I'm struggling with, Albert, is the story. You are the commissioner of sports, and this is a sports-related story, but it also crosses the sports boundary into the world of broadcast and ownership, ESPN, Disney. It was front page of the New York Times today, so this is not, some obscure tale. So it's the story of Pat McAfee and Aaron Rodgers. And I'd like to turn to the commissioner for what is happening with this Pat Commish. Tell us who Pat McAfee is, a red-hot podcaster. He was a punter, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was an NFL punter, and he transitioned into media. He actually retired early, and people thought it was a bad decision, but he bet on himself, and he had a very successful YouTube show, so kind of like us. So
yeah, we bet on ourselves. You're right. Thank you. Now, one of the main guests who repeatedly came on his show, I guess, and would say controversial things is Aaron Rodgers, the quarterback formerly from Green Bay. I mean, this is an all-star quarterback. We all know who Aaron Rodgers is.
On the Jets, kind of a local
Jets.
guy here in Northern California.
Yeah.
And he used to make a Wednesday appearance on the show, which was kind of groundbreaking because he hates media and he never did it, but he only did it for Pat since they're good friends. And like I said, it started on YouTube, but it eventually Pat McAfee's his show was really hot, so it kind of they got picked up by ESPN, and he really dictated a lot of the terms. So like he could cuss on air. He basically whatever they did on YouTube is what they could do on ESPN.
Now, and I'll remind you, he could cuss on cable because you're not affected by FCC regulations, right? Those are for across the air broadcast standards. So he takes this show with all of this leverage that Pat McAfee has. He makes this deal on his own with ESPN, as Albert has said. He can do whatever he wants. He doesn't have to change the show in any way, which means he can continue to have Aaron Rodgers on. So he does have Aaron Rodgers on. And what does Rodgers do?
Well, he starts the beef. He does the whole Epstein list thing with Jimmy Kimmel, who's actually on the main station because ABC, ESPN, sister stations, all under Disney. So there's kind of like a in family. That's like us starting beef at KMBR back in the day, like from KGO. We're like, just down the hall, we're starting this beef, and at some point we got to stop.
No, exactly. So they're under the same umbrella, which is why I was mentioning before, this sort of crosses the area of sports into this other arena, because you now have one of your broadcast, I'll just use the term generally, stars, right, in Pat McAfee, who is allowing this other guy on who is a football star, that's Aaron Rodgers, and he insults, with a brutal kind of lame insult, one of your huge stars, Jimmy Kimmel, suggesting, pedophilia and all that. It's really, it's pretty gross. So just with the one comment. So what happens, Albert? Does anybody issue a retraction? I thought there was sort of a lame retraction issued.
Yeah, so, well, first of all, Aaron Rodgers did make his final appearance like 30 minutes ago, so he is on the show today.
But this is interesting. You say final appearance. He will not be on the show anymore, apparently, right?
Well, Pat McAfee did put a lengthy tweet out there. Basically, you remember when athletes were kind of having a political stance on things and a lot of people were telling them shut up and dribble? Pat McAfee's literally told his audience that he's just going to shut up and dribble, get out of the politics in this long tweet. But he said it's not the end for Rodgers. He still keeps that door open for him whenever he wants to come on the air. So
I see. Yeah. Well,
not
Rodgers
all the way done, but he is going to shut up and dribble.
Rodgers touched a hot stove. I don't know how soon he's going to want to, be back in it. I think he got a
little too comfortable. I think there's a reason why he didn't want to do a lot of media, because he is a little bit of a, we've talked about him a lot, and we didn't talk about him a lot about what he's done on the field this year. So I think that's a kind of a telltale sign of.
I think the commissioner's right. I think the commissioner's onto something. He talks first and acts questions later. He's an anti-vaxxer, as you know. And being an anti-vaxxer, controversial enough probably at the time he was outspoken about it. But what he did was he lied about getting the vax. Then it was revealed he was anti-vax. And I think that's what hurt him. I think if he'd been upfront about, I don't want the vaccine and I'm going to go through the additional protocols to be part of the team, even though I haven't been vaxxed. Wouldn't you agree with that, Commissioner?
Yeah. And overall, I think there's just a lot coming out about Rogers. It just seemed like a high school bully or like any school bully, just like making something up on the poor band kid, the Jimmy Kimmel, the band kid, and he's the jock, just saying, oh yeah, but this and this, it's completely baseless, and everybody just rolls with it because they're the new and hot popular thing. So. Yeah,
and this is the key, this host-on-host insult thing that they were doing, that's particularly dangerous. They have a bunch of people weighing in on the fact that that can lead to huge issues. When you bring executives into talent on talent, I mean, it's weird because ESPN, in a way, they live off of those opinion shows where you've got, Tony Kornheiser going up against somebody else. You know what I mean? It's got these...
Stephen A. Smith yelling.
Stephen A. Smith, great example. Yeah. Stephen A. Smith. So what you end up with is a situation where you can have the back and forth on your shows, but it's controlled and it's limited to sports. The minute people start, mouthing off about others, that can be an issue. McAfee, in the first year of a 5-year agreement that pays him a total of $85 million. So he's somebody who's doing well.
I'm sure anybody in my demographic, it's hard to not know who Pat McAfee is because he had this huge show on YouTube. He's on ESPN. He's on college football now. He did WWE announcing. He's wrestled at WrestleMania. He's everywhere. It's a little too much now, but we have in the comments, Aaron said he was immunized. That's the words.
Oh, that's right. He said he was immunized. That's what Aaron Rodgers said. ESPN would not want to deal with the fallout of ending that contract, that $85 million contract of Pat McAfee's, prematurely, especially when Mr. McAfee is one of its star personalities and occupies hours of television each day. This is what Albert was saying. One possible reason Mr. McAfee escaped punishment also is that while Mr. Williamson had never been criticized by an ESPN employee publicly, Williamson was somebody else that Williamson is the executive who oversees Sports Center. Okay, so McAfee and Williamson can get into it, but McAfee has all the leverage because McAfee's under this big deal. And so one possible reason that he escaped punishment is that while Mr. Williamson had never been criticized by an ESPN employee so publicly, it wasn't the first time someone at the network clashed with him, and it's believed that he was being undermined. So at the end of all of this, I mentioned the Williamson thing because he's mentioned prominently in this piece. I think it's interesting that ESPN executives essentially have to kowtow to their talent now, somebody as powerful as Pat McAfee. Now,
I think they were suffering from kind of a decline in viewership overall before Pat McAfee, and they were so desperate. They gave him the bag. They hired all of his staff, because I think usually you just hire a host and then he just goes to ESPN, does the ESPN thing. They took his whole staff with him, his producers, the cameraman, everything, same exact show on ESPN, and he has a lot of power. I feel like within ESPN, so it's gonna be hard to take him off the air. But I think they did have a talk about Aaron Rodgers for sure.
That's it. That's the word from the commissioner on Pat McAfee. Love it.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It's pretty big because a lot of people do watch that ESPN. I'm telling you what, Kim. As the Niners climb into competition, they're all over ESPN. By the way, Albert, Niners off this week, right?
Niners off this week. A lot of coaches have retired, though. So Bill Belichick has mutually parted ways with the Patriots.
Oh, yeah.
Pete Carroll's out from the Seahawks.
Right, that's right.
Nick Saban.
Oh, that's right. What is the commish? That's a pretty big deal that you've got Belichick leaving, and it's a pretty big deal that Pete Carroll's leaving. They're both really high-end coaches, wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, especially, they both played each other in the Super Bowls, too, and they're left a huge legacy with those franchises. And then don't forget Alabama's coach, Nick Saban, who's
Oh,
ran
yeah.
that for the longest time.
Another
He's also
dominant
retiring,
collegiate
so.
coach. Yeah.
Yeah.
The commish with a lot on his plate today. Thank you, sir.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Gail Guthrie is HOF on this show, as you know, supporter and contributor.
Big shout
out. I think the 49ers are the only good story at the moment. Can't wait for Friday Fabulous Florida tomorrow. We need some laughs. Yeah. Ain't that true?
It's only because the Niners were just a sour moment for us a couple weeks ago against the Ravens. So
against the Ravens, that was brutal.
Week by week.
But that's being spun as a positive thing. It shakes them out of whatever complacency they might have been in. So complacency is a ding word, yes. I have...
But yeah, in terms of sports, it's been awful here for Bay Area sports. The Warriors are just a dumpster fire.
I don't know what's going on. Now, Draymond is getting back into the lineup?
I think he played. He's back to practicing. So we'll see. There's the footage of that man who attacked the Vegas judge a couple days ago, and then he had another court appearance in he was shackled. He had the mask on, kind of like a Hannibal Lecter type of situation.
Yeah, they brought him in Hannibal Lecter.
Draymond Green mentions about that guy. Tweeting on Twitter.
He's Draymond is the that guy of the NBA. I'm just saying. It's all right. Chunk of Trump. The story for the older boys and girls, but it also involves Gen Z and millennials. I've got Law and Disorder, David Katz. The Chunk of Trump involves a couple of, and I still want to do that Stories from the Sky. If I can, just do a brief Stories from the Sky on that United Airlines flight. Because you realize how it's more complicated. It's not just Boeing aircraft. You realize a few things about airline travel. We'll get into it. I'll just give you a word about that. So all of that's still to come. Smash the like button like a boss, if you would, please. If you're here, welcome. You may have come here from TYT. A lot of people have come here from TYT. Thank you. We're a show that was a radio show birthed in San Francisco, California, a place that we love, troubled as it is, the Bay Area, and we moved it to YouTube. So on this platform, we've lived for a little over a year. We're closing in. We just passed 19,000 subs, which I know in the world of YouTube may not seem like a lot.
We're so close to 20,000.
But for us, that's a really big deal.
Yeah.
And so we've worked really hard, and I want you to know we continue to work really hard, and we're committed to this. And so smash the like button. That costs you nothing.
Your iron rod.
And subscribe. If you're here and you haven't subscribed, subscribe. Well, let's get
Please
to 20,000.
subscribe.
Yeah.
Please subscribe, everyone. I don't know how much longer I can plead with you. Please subscribe.
Kim's News, Chunk of Trump, Stories in the Sky, David Katz, Belinda with It's the Planet Stupid, all of it in this very tight 2-hour show. Mark Thompson Show.
The Mark Thompson Show.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister. This report sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. That's right. Let us begin with the weather. You mentioned it. What a dump. Look at this. And by dump, I don't mean like a horrible place. I mean a snow dump. Yeah, it's really snowy.
Wow. Where is that?
Heavy snow somewhere that's not here. Heavy snow will hit the central U.S. today, the Great Lakes region on Friday, and the Northeast on Saturday. Severe thunderstorms are expected from Arkansas to the Gulf Coast today. The Southeast from Alabama to North Carolina could see another 3 inches of rain as part of this.
There's never been anything like this.
Thank you, Albert. I was going to hit one of that also.
Yeah, that's a lot of snow.
Yeah.
I don't know. Unfounded. Yep. Unfounded. That is how the White House is describing allegations that Israel has committed genocide in Gaza. They say that those allegations are unfounded, but South Africa is presenting a case to the International Court of Justice accusing Israel of genocide in its war against Hamas. Israel set to address the court on Friday. Former President Trump is calling his New York civil fraud trial a witch hunt. Yeah. We could have guessed it, right? He's saying it again, and he says he should be paid damages. What? The judge who originally indicated that Trump wouldn't be permitted to make a statement during today's closing arguments actually did allow the former president to speak for 5 minutes. Trump, his adult sons, and his business associates are already accused of inflating the value of real estate in order to get more favorable loans. So how much will they pay in damages is the question. And no, Trump isn't going to be paid damages here. The Pentagon is conducting an internal review over Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin's recent hospital stay. Austin reportedly failed to promptly notify top officials that he had been hospitalized after being diagnosed with prostate cancer. President Biden and other top officials were not made aware until after the fact that Austin checked into Walter Reed on January 1st and spent a few days in the ICU. Here's a bit of news for you. This is former Oakland Mayor Libby Schaaf.
Oh, yeah.
And she is announcing today she is running for the California State Treasurer's Office in 2026.
Wow.
Yep. Schaaf served as Oakland Mayor from 2015 until she termed out in 2023. She
used to be on with Nikki all the time.
That's right. She's the first candidate to enter the race for state treasurer. Current state treasurer Fiona Ma, who's held the office since 2019, is running for lieutenant governor in 2026.
Ah, I see.
Okay. So you see how they all shift around.
Yeah, like they all begin to move up the chain.
Moving puzzle.
She was one of my first people I had to use the dump button on air. She cussed, and I had to dump her. Yeah.
Oh, well, I love that.
Cussed on air?
Sometimes public policy issues cannot be constrained by the English language that we all generally adhere to. She wanted to crank it up a little bit. Good for her. I like that, Libby Schaaf.
Yep, there you go. You mentioned
she's got my vote, Kim.
Yeah. Good. You mentioned the avalanche that happened in the Tahoe area. Well, Palisades Tahoe has reopened today, but they are on high alert after that deadly avalanche. We are, though, hearing from one of the survivors, and here she is, Janet He. She said she had to tell herself not to panic. And that, she says, is a big reason why she's alive after getting caught in this massive avalanche. He was skiing down a run at Palisades Tahoe Ski Resort in Olympic Valley when she was buried under snow from the avalanche. She said she was wondering if she was going to die in the snow when she heard the voice of someone trying to help.
Wow. That's intense.
And here she is. And today she's speaking out and she's doing okay. You know, minor injuries, but she managed to survive this, and someone else wasn't so lucky. So, yeah. This report sponsored by CoachellaValleyCoffee.com, where you can really treat yourself to the good stuff. I'm telling you, you pour it into your Mark Thompson Show coffee mug, and you really get going. So good. Huge selection of coffees and teas, which I love, at CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. And you can also benefit from being a Mark Thompson Show listener. 10% off is yours if you just put in Mark T at checkout. All together, you get your 10% off. And yes, you get to enjoy the good stuff. I'm Kim McAllister. This is The Mark Thompson Show.
They had to close down an entire radio station to silence him. And now, he's here. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Thompson.
Smash it with your iron rod.
I come from regular stock.
There's a reason that this place is fun. Don't ever use that word.
What are the porn stars doing, Mark?
They pay me a lot of money for having attitude.
What you say is the political dogma that they're trying to shove down our throats.
Straight up right in, no problem.
What the hell is going on in the United States of America?
Cuatro años más.
I don't wear a mask for the same reason I don't wear underwear. Things
America's gotta breathe.
Say what?
Do you have a secret talent?
You get nothing.
Y'all can all go to hell, and I'm going back to Texas.
Out of time. Bye-bye.
Did you really just do that?
What up, everybody? Welcome. We still have David Katz, the former federal prosecutor, on deck. He is going to help decode a bit of what's going on in Donald Trump's cases. Also, I want to ask him about a class action that has nothing to do with Trump. It has to do with the people on board that Alaska Airlines jet and others who have suffered sort of similar harrowing experiences. And might there actually be the possibilities of launching class actions to, in some way, bring these airlines into conformity when it comes to maintenance and other things to avoid such incidents? Anyway, we'll talk to him about that and other issues related to the law. Obviously, Trump is front and center, and the latest thing Trump did is super controversial. You heard Kim talking about it. I think it's controversial. Essentially, calling out the prosecutor, calling out the judge. Mm-hmm. At what point does that stop working, or does it ever work? I want to talk to David about that as well. But I have a story. I'll get to Chunk of Trump, and I will do it prior to David, not related to the legal stuff so much. Related to a Newsom Trump. I've got a Newsom Trump story coming up in Chunk of Trump. But I did want to touch on this story for the older boys and girls. And I mentioned this.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It's not just for older boys and girls, but you'll understand why I say it that way as I begin to tell you this story. Because there's something that I do, and maybe those of us who have been around a while, and one of the reasons in my case that I'm hard of hearing is because of these things. I've worn headphones for a long time and, cranked up, and then even when I was on television, I wore an IFB, and sometimes it's too loud, etc. Well, I watch everything with captions, okay? But I'm not alone. Fully half the people who watch anything, regardless of age, watch with captions. In fact, the Gen Z generation, they're already seeing everything with captions.
What?
That's the way a lot of Gen Zers take it in. So now to how you watch at home and how you might enjoy movies in the theater. In the theater, you pay a lot of money to park, to go to the movie, to get popcorn, and yet you cannot watch the films with captions in general. Mm-hmm. As a result, it's keeping a lot of people away from the theater. According to recent studies, roughly half of all viewers use captions most or all of the time, including 53% of millennials and 70% of Zoomers. Those are Gen Z. So Gen Z is 1997 to 2012. If you were born 1997 to 2012, you're Gen Z. So that's somebody in their, teens and 20s, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Baby boomers are 1946 to 1964, so that's 59 years old to 77 years old, okay? And millennials, like Albert would be a millennial, 27 to 42 years of age. 81 to 96 are the years you're born. Anyway, just to kind of recalibrate. But what's happening is that a lot of these Gen Zers and Gen Xers, they're all watching with captions anyway. So the problem comes for what they call these theater, movie theaters. They call them, they're called something. They're called, some term that they throw all movie theater owners into. The problem comes for them in catering to all of these different generations, particularly given the fact that captions are a thing. So having captions on video content is becoming the new standard, and theaters are going to have to respond to that. There are theaters and there are showings of films that do have captions, but you have to find those theaters and those showings at those theaters that have the captions. As moviegoers jammed back into theaters this summer, many found themselves wondering, why aren't there captions here also? In the case of the Barbie screening, there was ASL interpretation offered, and that became sort of almost had a comedic element. Caption film, yeah.
Don't you find sometimes a character will say something, or an actor will say something like under their breath, or whisper it or something, even on the big screen with the loud, and it's hard, sometimes it's garbled and hard to understand what exactly they just said. I love the captions for a myriad of reasons. Yeah.
And you throw the accent in, you throw the British accent, Aussie accent, whatever it might be,
right,
and it becomes really tough.
Yeah.
So, but getting open captions in theaters is far more complicated than just toggling between menu options on a smart TV, say people who want them in theaters. Hawaii, for example, has mandated open caption screenings in theaters since 2015. But showings in the other 49 states, not so much. Then a few months after most movie theaters reopened in 2021, during the COVID-19 pandemic, the country's largest cinema chain, AMC, announced that they would begin screening new releases with open captions at limited showings in 240 of their U.S. theaters. In 2022, New York City began requiring up to 4 open caption showings per movie per week at most theaters. The National Association of Theater Owners, a national industry group, did not respond apparently to requests for comment, but without it being mandated by law, it may be a slow thaw in the kind of existing freeze on open captions. But there are a bunch of theaters, smaller cities too. Placerville has open caption showings there in Northern California. Angelinos in Southern California can find about a dozen open caption showtimes a week if you know where to look. But moviegoers say there's no easy way to keep track of what's showing and when, and going across town for a 1 p.m. weekday showing hardly justifies the $23 ticket price, they say here. And it's suggested then, I mean, this is the implication that theater owners have to get hip to the fact that that is wanted. So, again, the workarounds being talked about, fitting theater patrons with special glasses that would then have closed captions. But, that's uncomfortable to wear glasses. It can be unreliable. So, this is a real problem, because even when you're in the theater and you're trying to take in the film, if you have to look below to see the captions or above to see, it's an issue. I don't know. I will tell you something in a rare moment of confession, if I can confess to you, Kim.
I'll hear your confession.
One of the reasons I don't go to the theater that much is because there are no captions.
Oh, yeah.
Because I need, these have destroyed my hearing to a large degree.
I'm in the same boat with you. Yeah, I have the captions on when I'm watching television. I always have the captions on.
Now,
do we have captions on the Mark Thompson show?
We can. You can caption it, I believe. Okay. In replay, I believe. Mm-hmm. Technology should get us out of this jam, but as yet, technology has not. So that's for my older and younger boys and girls. I think that's the reality. Theater owners are going to have to come around to this, and there's just too much demand for you not to bring theaters up to the standard that there is at home. So that's
The Mark Thompson Show.
By the way, one of the reasons you really need closed captions at home is because of something that is absolutely real. You may feel as though it's only happening at your house, but I was reading an article a few months ago about the fact that the audio is compressed together. So you're not getting separation of dialogue from a lot of background sound. It's a real sloppy, bad way in which it's delivered to you. And it's almost hard to find whose fault it is. But when you get audio to your TV for anything, even a high-grade movie that you've paid a lot of money for, it is smashed together through the delivery system of streaming. It is smashed together, and now
with your iron rod.
that dialogue is not separated from a lot of the other sounds. And so all of this painstaking work they do in sound design to create contours and to create essentially a kind of global, complete picture in your mind of the sounds in a situation, that's all lost. It's crammed together through this streaming. And so the dialogue is often buried behind sounds that would not normally bury it in the theater. So if you need closed captioning at home, it can also be for a reason that has nothing to do with you losing your hearing. The dialogue is just buried in there, and that's just a fact. So they should do something about that as well, but that is a much, much tougher nut to crack from what I understand. So, all right, now,
The Mark Thompson Show.
Albert, you are the producer of this show, and so I ask you what I should do. Do I have time for Trump right now? A chunk of Trump? Do I?
Albert,
let's just do a chunk of Trump, and if it runs a little long, we could go straight to David and then do a supersized news at the bottom. So
you got it. All right. We like to keep an eye on the guy who might be the next president of the United States. We do it in a segment we call Chunk of Trump.
Open wide. Ready? Here comes your chunk of Trump.
It's my favorite food.
With your first bite, here's Mark Thompson.
I have a feeling it's going to be beautiful.
Well, I will tell you the news about Trump during the time he was president. He told European leaders that the U.S. would never come help if Europe was attacked. And he said NATO is dead.
What?
Multiple news outlets saying that the exchange between Trump and Ursula von der Leyen at the World Economic Forum in Davos was described in Brussels this week. You need to understand that if Europe is under attack, we will never come to help you and to support you, Trump said.
Oh, my God.
By the way, he continued, NATO is dead and we will leave. We will quit NATO.
Does that not go against everything we stand for?
I don't know about everything, but certainly a lot.
Do you remember?
We have major agreements that are in place as a result.
Threat to the Constitution has really kind of, overtaken everything in my mind, but it brings back memories of when Trump was in office, and my worry was how we were being perceived by the international community. He was doing things, but pulling us out of climate agreements and saying things to allies that are like, what? And supporting Russia when it's like, again, what? Doing these international things that made absolutely no sense. And here again, I'm reminded that if we go back to a Trump presidency, this is what we're getting again.
That's one of the reasons it's coming out, I think, in the press is for just what you're saying, that it's a reminder. He talked about the fact that you owe me, he was talking to the Germans, $40 billion, what you had to pay for defense. Threats to quit NATO and demands that European nations increase contributions to it were a feature of Trump's presidency. Also a concern by Europe over his opaque, apparently submissive relationship with Vladimir Putin. Opaque is a ding word. A big wake-up call, warned one European leader. He may come back. That was Trump as president talking about that. Donald Trump also saying that he's proud to have overturned Roe v. Wade At a Fox News town hall airing against the debate last night, or whatever you want to call that thing, that presidential appearance on CNN with the two GOP presidential candidates, Trump took credit for ending the right to what we know about. I try to avoid the word because I get demonetized every day. Former President Donald Trump saying last night at a town hall event that he was proud to have helped overturn Roe v. Wade by appointing 3 conservative justices to the U.S. Supreme Court. He would work to oppose all of the ending of pregnancies and asked whether his anti-abortion position was better than that of Florida Ron DeSantis, his campaign rival. And Trump actually said, for 54 years, they were trying to get Roe v. Wade terminated, and I did it, and I'm proud to have done it. Trump criticized, I just want to, give the devil his due, or give you some sense of what's going on in that race. He criticized the anti-abortion movement for explicitly political reasons. He's saying that that's an untenable position to win most of the American public over on. He saw the push for total abortion bans as contributing to Republicans' poor showings in the 2022 midterm elections. So he understands the politics of it. He doesn't really care about the other things underpinning that question. A new poll finds voters prefer Trump to Gavin Newsom. That's right.
What?
A new Michigan poll finding that voters in the critical swing state of Michigan would prefer former President Donald Trump, the presumptive Republican nominee, presumptive is a ding word, in a hypothetical is a ding word, presidential matchup against California Governor Gavin Newsom. The poll, conducted by the Lansing, Michigan-based Glenn Gariff Group, was commissioned by the Detroit News and WDIV-TV. They found that 45% of voters would cast a ballot for Trump, compared with 40% who said they would vote for Newsom. Critical, though, are the 13% of respondents who said they didn't know whom they would vote for. Another 3% said they would vote for someone else. Really? 13% of you didn't know who you would vote for? I don't know. Trump or Newsom? Don't know. Really? Responding.
That's a pretty big difference. Just saying.
They're just too close. Well, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, as you know, they're all huge swing states. Really, that's the whole election comes down to those states. So we'll see. Biden took those states in 2020, won by 3 percentage points, but that's not a lot of people. That's about 150,000, a little over 150,000 people. So, look, the 2028 presidential cycle, which is really where Newsom would show up, is still a long ways away. But Newsom maybe can take something from that, but we'll see. I think Newsom is so impressive in so many of these different situations, but he has to own a lot of stuff, and he may come across a certain way. And as I've talked about before and continue to talk about, and we will likely continue to talk about it here, voters vote viscerally. They vote really on stuff that doesn't have to do with policy, believe it or not. That is your chunk of Trump.
That's it for this edition.
Well, I really enjoyed it.
But make sure to join us again next time
I think you might want to listen. There's nothing wrong with listening.
for another chunk of Trump.
Push the like button like a boss.
Smash it with your iron rod.
Yeah, hit us with a thumbs up, and it costs you nothing, and it helps us enormously. Anything I need to address in the chat before I move on to Kim's news and David Katz? I literally, if I step back, I can see the chat. Crazy story from the skies. The Gambian national football team's plane traveling to Ivory Coast failed to release oxygen. Many players passed out. Is that right, Albert?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
That's true.
Kim, wow, that's unreal. Thank you,
Kim,
Edward
how are you?
Lee. Big shout out.
Big shout
Thank you
out.
for that morsel. I'm sure Kim has that and other stuff in her news. Stan Pollock, CPA, my favorite CPA. Big shout out, Stan.
Big shout out.
Thank you for the super sticker, super chat. Mark, in all our minds, you've already exceeded 20,000 a long time ago. Oh, thank you. I'm not going to cry.
I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry.
But I am moved by that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Spencer Jaffe, how about Speak Out for Democracy? 5 spots from
shout out.
Spencer. Thank you, Spencer, for the super chat. Super chat, super stickers are live. They're live. Let's do it.
We'll do it live.
We'll do it
I can go
live.
write it and we'll do it
I'll write my
live.
super sticker and I'll give you $10. Very cool. What is this about? Natalie says, YouTube watchers obviously don't have Southern manners. That is, don't tell someone their hair is bad. Instead, gossip behind their backs about it. If you tuned in late, somebody said my hair color is too dark, which is true. It's just now coming into acceptable range, but I was rocking it too dark for a while.
That sounds like any workplace environment too, Natalie. Just, don't say anything, but we'll all talk about it later.
I mean, I get roughed up on this show, man. It's just part of it. I guess it comes with the territory. People saying I yell too much. I only watch for the yelly parts, Tom says. Yeah. Thank you, Tom. I try to serve up some yelling because the kids want that.
Why are you yelling?
I mean, that's what you like when John McEnroe plays. In these exhibitions now, John McEnroe, the tennis player, says, if I don't yell at the referee, people feel like they didn't get their money's worth. You know what I mean? So I've got to contest a call somewhere. I got to go nuts. Otherwise, people get angry that they haven't gotten their money's worth. Wes says, better get this in before demonetization. Thank you for this 5 spot, Wes.
Big shout out.
Love everybody in the chat who watches in replay, and thank you for all the ways you support us. Haley 2024, talking a lot and saying nothing, says B.A. Ware. Nikki Haley is malleable. She is changing all the time. Malleable would be a ding word. She really does very much change her position based on the question and the audience. You could say, well, that's just politics, or you could say, well, that's, just not cool. I don't know what's worse. Someone who changes their position, as I've just said, or someone whose positions never change and they're awful. I don't know what's worse. I suppose the second. What was the bleeped word, John wants to know, Albert, in the Libby Schaff interview in which you had her first appearance on KGO, if you're just joining us? Albert said he had to bleep her. What was the word she was bleeped on?
She was describing the streets, and she described it as a lot of S on the streets. Not just San Francisco, but just in general, there was a lot of S going on in the street.
Wow. Yeah.
Seriously, what the
Yeah, that's she didn't hit us seriously what the
Seriously, what the
No, that would be a little bit too much, huh? Yeah. But
I dumped a lot of callers though. That was like keep your finger on the button for any call.
Oh, is that right? You dumped a lot of callers.
I did work a lot with John Rothman in my early times, and Rothman would just open up the lines. That was an easy job for me. No screening. He'd take anybody. So I just put the names in the chat. Name and city. He didn't even care what they wanted to say. He just bring him on.
John is great because he just he doesn't, John Rothman I'm talking about, he just sits back and brings the calls on, and then he can just spin off of whatever people say. I
love it.
All right, let's get to Kim. Where's Kat? This is what's going to happen here. So Katz shows up late.
Katz is going to show up.
Katz is going to show up late. That's going to make us go late. We're going to go into Belinda. Belinda's not going to like that. And then before I know it, I got an HR situation on my hands. I don't know what to do with this.
They do this to me all the time. I don't know what the hell they do it for.
do it to me all the time. Did you send Katz a reminder, Kim?
I'm doing it right now.
I mean, we really need to. And also, what happened to the pictures I was supposed?
And I also want to know what happened to the pictures I was supposed to see this week.
Do you want to quickly do this United Airlines story
instead of Kim's news?
Yeah, because I think we could dump out of that whenever we want. For Kim, I feel like once we get her going, we got to finish strong.
Okay, but you won't be able to do Kim. If we bring on, just to think in the moment. If you bring on, you won't be able to do a supersized newscast.
Let's do Turbo News then. Turbo News and
let's do news and then Turbo News, super quick news check with Kim.
I'll watch for David Katz and I'll wrap it up when I see him pop in.
All right, Mark Thompson.
The Mark Thompson Show.
On the Mark Thompson Show, I'm Kim McAllister, and we begin with, here he is, former President Trump. Thank the ever-loving good Lord for that. He's blasting the civil fraud case brought against him in New York. I didn't say this wasn't partisan news. Clearly, there's a
I was going to say, you want to hear that?
You want to hear that on CNN? Speaking to reporters after his defense team made its closing arguments, Trump said prosecutors don't have any evidence against him and that the case is politically motivated.
Good evening, Trump. What a joke. Can't believe he said this stuff. I'm David Muir. Yeah, you won't hear that.
He made his comments at the same time New York Attorney General Letitia James was making her closing argument. Disinformation is the top threat facing the world economy, according to a group of global finance experts. The World Economic Forum this week conducting a survey among 1,400 industry leaders and policymakers, asking them what they thought were the top 10 risks facing the global economy. The number one answer was misinformation and disinformation. So there you go.
Katz is here, by the way, Kim.
Yeah, we've got Katz. We've got Katz in the.
That is the Mark Thompson Show. That's
Katz in the cradle and the whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. Party over. I'm Kim McAllister. On to the next thing.
Wow.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, David doesn't realize this, but we've been talking about like how to handle this because if you don't come in, David, right. Like when you're, close to the top of the hour, it creates all these problems for us. And so we have to discuss them out loud with the audience. Like, if we don't take, David doesn't show, what do we do? Do we go to news? We go to this? We go to that? He's the former federal prosecutor, now working the defense side of the table. You can hear him on London radio. I mentioned this in the first hour. You hear him. Everybody tries to get a piece of David Katz because his analysis is so keen. Fox 5 in New York. CBS in Los Angeles, and then everything in between. Yes, Katz in the house, says everybody. Katz in the house. How about it for David Katz?
Hi, it's great to be with you.
It is great to have you here. This is so apropos because he just did this moments ago, apparently. Donald Trump has, and I won't just talk about Trump, but I would like to start there. Obviously, there's a lot going on in these cases. But let me just ask you about a style thing that he does, because he's just done it, as I said. He just goes off on the judge and on the prosecutor, on the witch hunt, on the politics of it. I want to ask you a question about that working and its efficacy. How effective is that tear up the scenery kind of thing that Trump does?
Well, it seems to have worked for him. I mean, let's face it now. Of course, the political scientists all say it works with his base and the MAGA people, and it really turns off the suburbanites because, people have a good sense that, someone who's going to be the commander in chief and the leader of the free world ought to stick to the topic, ought to be focused. And he's obviously unfocused and scattered. And so I think that sensible people are kind of revolted by that aspect of him, as well as, of course, many other aspects of what I would call his really obnoxious personality. I was having dinner, this is a couple of years ago when he was still in the White House, and everybody at the dinner was conservative. I found myself there, and they were all saying, my God, the people elected a businessman. Why don't people like him? I said, well, let's start out, he's obnoxious. And they said, well, of course he's obnoxious, but people ought to take that in stride. And I thought, you're a politician, you're a glad hander. You want people to like you. You want them to have confidence in you. So I always thought that, that's why he's sort of a demagogue. He's sort of a person for this polarized time because, I think the argument for people, a lot of them who are in his base and why they vote for him in their heart, whether they tell a pollster or not, is that, they want only someone as obnoxious and scattered as him can stand up to the, quote, woke mob. I don't see the world that way at all, but I think that's a lot of what's going on. Now, regarding court, the judge is in a difficult situation. He has a lawyer. He has no legal right to add to what his lawyer has to say. The lawyer makes the closing argument, not the client. Everybody knows that. If you're in pro per, if you're representing yourself pro se, they tell you, look, you have to follow all the rules of a lawyer if you want to be your own lawyer. And then, of course, a lot of times those people acting as their own lawyers, those few, I think those foolhardy ones, are told by the judge, look, you have to obey the rules. You have to do this. They get held in contempt. They get told to stop. Now, the optics are, of course, very difficult with the cameras there and the world watching if he cuts him off, because he plays into Trump's narrative. The judge didn't want to hear what I had to say. And the average person doesn't go through the analysis that I just did, Mark, and say, well, wait a second. You're trying to have your cake and eat it too. You have a very skilled lawyer. I think this is the $3 million man who made the closing argument. So here's a real rich guy who can pay $3 million to his lawyers, but says, oh, the only way that I can have a proper closing argument is for me to go analyze the evidence. Well, no, it's not. He wants to give a stump speech. He wants to say just what he said. This is a victimless crime. Turning to that, Mark, it's not a victimless crime. You and I have talked about this. If you and I get together and we concoct a bunch of financial statements which aren't true to show that we're worth millions of dollars, and we then submit them to a bank, even though they say these are not audited statements, nevertheless, you and I would be signing them under penalty of perjury that they are true. If we get a bank to rely on them, the bank wants to have collateral if it turns out that the investment goes south. They don't want to find out later on that it was all inflated. We didn't own what we had. Now, let's take the case of New York City real estate, where these lenders apparently made money. The lender doesn't want to take a risk. It's not a casino. They want to have collateral. They want representations that are true about what it's worth. So the fact that these banks ended up not complaining very much, there are two reasons. Number one, they happened to make money. They'd have screamed like crazy if they'd have lost money, but they happened to make money even with the phonied up sheets, financial reports that Trump and the other defendants submitted. But on top of that, they're scared, like a lot of people, he might be president again. So how long and loud do you want to scream right now about a guy who might be president a year and can determine your financial future if you're those lenders? All nothing, all zero. And of course, this is the little speech that Trump gave, and he'll give those speeches outside. But does it work for him? Yes, I think it works for him with his base.
I love that you gave us that analysis, because I've heard and read this doesn't work. At some point, he reaches a point of diminishing returns on this. But and again, I'm just a layperson, obviously, but I think it is very effective. I think over time you believe it, but it was pointed out here in the chat, I think it was Spencer, said, why could Trump even speak? Wasn't he told that he wouldn't be speaking at closing arguments for all the reasons that you sort of outlined? You have an attorney, Mr. Trump, or President Trump. Why don't you just adhere to the rules of this courtroom? What he was just allowed to go off?
It's just the optics. I think a lot of people out there who are not legally trained and who haven't thought about it thinks, you're on trial, they want millions of dollars, why can't you say what you want to say? Especially, it's not a jury trial, it's just a judge. But the point is that the show is not for the courtroom. The show's not for the Court of Appeals. The Court of Appeals will think that this is a frivolous appellate argument, that he, not the $3 million lawyer that he hired to handle the case and to make the closing argument, but he himself ought to be allowed to get up there and add things. But the first, he told him when he was trying to do this by email, Trump was trying to seek permission. The judge told him, you can speak, but if you go off script, if you don't analyze the evidence, but you try to introduce new matters or completely irrelevant matters, or you make your stump speech, or you attack me and my staff, you do all the things that you're not allowed to do under this properly entered gag order. If you do those things, I'm going to escort you out of the courtroom, and I'm going to hold you in contempt and fine you at least $50,000. Trump didn't like the optics of being let out, right, by marshals. He likes to be the friend of law enforcement. The optic of marshals taking him out forcibly from a courtroom, he didn't like. He didn't like the $50,000 or more fine. So he played the game, right? He didn't agree to that. And then when he actually got there, the judge said to him, are you going to abide by the rules if I let you speak for 5 minutes? And Trump apparently just launched into what he wanted to say, that he was a victim. They ought to pay him. This is terrible. He's always the victim. He's always the victim. But, you got to remember a couple of things, Mark. This is the case where he said that his apartment was 3 times the size that it was. That's not an opinion. And after you hear that enough, these banks, they hear it, they see it on other forums. Should the bank have gone over there and actually measured the place? Should they have looked at the plans? they probably should have. And there's all kinds of reasons I won't get into why he might have gotten a very soft look at his financial records from that bank that he had this very suspicious relationship with. Putting all of that aside, this is not an opinion, Mark. You cannot say something is 3 times the size it is. You can't say that you have a property that's 2,000 square feet and it's, 500 square feet. And you do that over and over again. And, he did this thing where he said that the value of these things for the IRS is very low. I shouldn't have to pay any tax because, there's all these restrictions and I can't rent this stuff and it has environmental restrictions on it. But then when it came to these banks that he wanted to lend them billions of dollars, of course, it was incredibly valuable. He could rent each unit for $10,000 a month. He didn't mention the environmental restrictions. So he was absolutely gaming the system. There's really no doubt about that. And he sort of has this thing that, well, they shouldn't really believe my financial statements. They should have looked at me with much more scrutiny than they did. And of course, he managed, because of all that thing, being a TV star, this whole brand that he managed to, influence the public. This is how he rolled, and this is how he's still rolling.
It's interesting. And also, I think this is just an Agolf says it's a chance for Donald to speak in court without risking perjury charges with his speech stuff. I suppose they're on some level
sworn in. Right. He wasn't sworn in. He was just, fulminating.
Yeah, except fulminating is such a ding word. God, nice job. Now, David, then to the question of immunity. I wonder if you could speak about this situation and the. Is it an interlocutory kind of part of where the judges ask questions of the attorneys? Is that I don't know what that's called, but where you can tell something based on the questions, sort of like, it seems like the judge is sort of skeptical of this.
Yeah, I think that the 3 judges are very skeptical. I think it's good that one of them is a Republican, and I think that all 3 of them are going to say that what do they say in the South? This dog won't hunt. And the reason that this dog won't hunt is because if you think about the implications for what the president could do, the idea that you have to be impeached and convicted in the Senate first before you can be prosecuted for anything really does logically raise the specter that they're about to impeach a president and he shoots or has shot one of the senators or one of the House managers. And the argument is, well, you can't be prosecuted even for that until after you've been impeached and convicted. Who in their right mind, right? This is what they do in third world countries. I don't lightly compare him to Hitler or something like that, but if you were a deputy under Hitler and you started to bring a motion against Hitler, you were tortured and disappeared, right? It's totally against our democracy and our rule of law that someone could be tortured, disappeared, a political enemy of the president, okay? But and so I think that the ruling is going to be fine. I think this is going to be fine. I think that the U.S. Supreme Court is then going to stay away from it. And maybe what they'll say is that after the trial, depending how things come in, if the evidence ends up showing that everything he was doing was in the course and scope of his duties, if it was in what the courts have called the outer perimeter of the course and scope of his duties, that he can bring that up on appeal and maybe have the case thrown out after an appeal if he's convicted. But I think they're maybe focused on this idea of, can you stop your trial? Can you do what you call an interlocutory appeal? Now, the argument goes like this, Mark. You have the right under double jeopardy, which the double jeopardy thing here is frivolous, but you have a right under true double jeopardy not to be put in jeopardy twice. That means you have a right not to have your second trial start if it really is a double jeopardy trial. He's arguing the same thing under presidential immunity, that he has a right not to have that trial ever start if he's truly immune. What's the point of immunity if they drag you through a trial? And the only case that the Trump side really has, they have all these blowhard arguments and crazy things that they say, like what I just said. Could they really go plant evidence on a political opponent and then you couldn't go to trial on that unless you were impeached and convicted? And how does that work with a former president? Because how do you impeach? They're really going to have impeachment and conviction of a former president? I mean, think about it. Doesn't Congress and the Senate have something else to do besides go and impeach a former president before Jack Smith can prosecute him for things that he did while he was president? But the troubling case, I mentioned it to you before, is this Nixon versus Fitzgerald. It's from the Nixon era. Remember this, though. Nixon was much more disgraced in the eyes of the law and the public than Trump is. Nixon was not running for re-election at that time. He was not running for any public office. So here's a disgraced person. And even with that 5-4, the U.S. Supreme Court said he didn't have to face any kind of civil trial or civil judgment. If the U.S. Supreme Court wants to take this and they want to have 5 or 6 justices on their side, they can say, hey, you guys are all talking about Dobbs. We didn't follow precedent of Roe v. Wade. Here we are following precedent. We're following Nixon v. Fitzgerald. That said that a former president cannot be tried civilly, and we're just saying that a former president can't be tried criminally. Now, there is a difference.
But that's a huge difference, David, right? Civil and criminal.
The idea, people say the greatest thing about America is that any pauper can sue any prince. And they say the worst thing about America is that any pauper could sue any prince. In other words, the idea is anybody can file a lawsuit against anyone. There's summary judgment, there's cases, that get dismissed, but anybody can sue anybody. So the Supreme Court 5-4 may have been thinking, anybody could sue anybody. You can't have a former president harassed for the rest of his or her life by having lawsuit after lawsuit. But criminal, they could say, if they reach this far, reach the merits of this, they could say, criminal is different because still you have to have a prosecutor decide to prosecute somebody. It's not just like anybody files a civil lawsuit. But if I can stay on Fitzgerald for a minute, it's a very scary case because the 4 dissenters in that case, where they were Marshall and Brennan, the 2 famous liberals. They were also Blackmun, the one who wrote Roe v. Wade, even though he was a Republican appointee by Nixon. And also a fascinating justice I won't get into named Whizzer White, who was appointed by JFK. The 4 of them dissented, and they said, look, if we are saying this, if we are letting a president do things a former president get away with things like this and not be sued, we're really saying that he can get away with things like this and not be prosecuted. The 4 dissenters said it right there that the logical extension of what the majority were ruling, was that a president could not be prosecuted. I'll say one last thing about Fitzgerald. Fitzgerald was an egregious case. It wasn't just somebody suing former President Nixon over something. Fitzgerald had testified as a whistleblower in Congress. Everyone agreed he told the truth, that they had overvalued this plane by about $2 billion. Obviously, Nixon and his friends were in favor of the plane, and they wanted to get back at the guy who'd blown the whistle in Congress, truthfully, that the plane was $2 billion more expensive than the record showed. The discovery showed that Nixon and his minions had absolutely targeted this guy, gotten him fired, ruined his career, despite the civil service protections that he had. With all of that evidence, former President Nixon in disgrace, they ruled that he could not be sued. That's the one precedent that I'm scared about, but I still think, hold your breath, everybody. Okay, breathe. That there's not going to say there's a presidential immunity, at least not one that kicks in at this stage and that stops this trial further. So I think early March, that trial in Washington, D.C., for all of the bad acts connected with the insurrection leading up to it, the slates, the obstruction of justice against Trump, I think right now it looks like it's on track. They may be picking a jury starting in March.
Wow. Wow. What a great summary of the law. They can rest a judgment in favor of the presidency, in this case, Trump, that they can rest that on. What a great summary of that.
Can I say one last thing, Mark? Mark, can I say one last thing?
Yeah.
They analogized it, the majority. 4 of them were Nixon appointees, for people who like that sort of thing, who ruled in favor of disgraced Nixon. But the 5 said, judges and prosecutors have immunity. If a judge, quote, railroaded you, but did it from the bench, let's say you could prove that the federal judge had found you guilty when you should have been found not guilty, didn't suppress evidence because the judge just had a personal animus towards you. They said you can't sue the judge or the prosecutor in that situation. Now, there's a lot of people who think that may really not be the law anymore. If a prosecutor's out to get you, and you can prove the prosecutor's out to get you, you know what I mean? You're dating his old lady, right? And so the prosecutor wants to get you for a personal vengeance reason like that. I'm not so sure that you can't sue the prosecutor, or you couldn't sue the judge on those facts. But they analogized it. And the dissenter said, at least you have to do it by functions. You can't do it by the office. The president shouldn't be any different from a judge or a prosecutor. It's the function. And that's the thing. That's the function, the outer perimeter of the function. And so this idea that you could give the State of a Union address and say that that was your function, but in the State of a Union address, in front of Congress, the president would say, I want you to kill my opponent, Mr. X. I think that they would say that the functionality of that, you can't hide that threat in the fact that it was the State of the Union. Having said that, Nixon was allowed not to be sued, and he went after that guy. He went after that guy in a way that he said it was an administrative personnel decision, but it was to get that guy because he told the truth in front of Congress in a way that Nixon didn't like, and they could prove that in discovery. Anyway, I do think they're going to win, Mark.
But that parallel is just so perfect because, we've seen that same kind of thing from the former President Trump times whatever. I mean, you look at that guy who testified before Congress. I mean, that seems sort of analogous to the about the Ukraine call I'm talking about. That seems sort of analogous to the Nixon situation. But this is obviously that upped to in any way suggest that there's a shield of immunity around the executive office. Wow, it's that's sobering, though, that case to which you've referred. I want to take you away from Trump for a second and ask you about a gun ruling here in California. There's a new California law that's barring licensed gun holders from carrying firearms in many public places, and it's being blocked. This law is being blocked. In other words, the law would have barred, again, gun holders from carrying their firearms in a lot of these places. That's being blocked because it's being appealed in federal court. I wonder if you could speak to that ruling, that appeal, and what happens in the interim. Just handicap that for me, please.
I think this one is going to come out all right. I think ultimately California's ban is going to be upheld. I don't think that the New York pistol case, which was a 6-3 decision, they even got Chief Justice Roberts on that one. It's a 6-3 decision, but I thought that case was more cautious in expanding Second Amendment rights than what the Ninth Circuit is doing here. This is sort of like the federal court's course, but I'll make it as succinct as I can. The reason it's confusing is that once California's ban, and basically the ban affects even people with gun licenses. So someone has gone through the vetting process of getting a gun permit, okay? If you don't have a gun permit, this doesn't affect you. But if you do have a gun permit, there are still under the California ban that went into effect January 1st, places you can't go. And a lot of them are very logical places that you can't go. You can't go into a place that serves alcohol. You can't go to Dodger Stadium, right? You can't go to, a school. You obviously can't go to a courthouse and other places like that. By the way, if the judges keep bans on locations, believe me, they'll keep bans on the courthouses. Just saying. But this ban was then blocked by a very well-respected U.S. district judge down in Orange County. And he said, look, I think that this ban is inconsistent with what the U.S. Supreme Court held 6-3 in the New York pistol case. It went up to be stayed, and one of the appellate panels on the Ninth Circuit, that's the federal appellate court that covers the entire West Coast, one panel said, well, wait a second, let's not put that injunction in place. Let's let the law go into effect, let the ban happen. So the ban did go into effect. Now another panel, which apparently looked at the merits more, okay, said, well, wait a second, it really is covered, we think. We think that the plaintiffs have a good chance of winning. So they let the ban, they took the ban out of effect again. So it's very confusing. Right now, the ban, okay, passed by California voters, okay, is not in effect. A person with a gun license, a gun permit in California can go into Dodger Stadium, opening day. They can go into bars, they can go to churches, they can go to other places where the California legislature decided that even if you have a gun permit, you should not be allowed to go. The argument by the gun owners is that what's the point of having a gun permit? It's so I can have self-protection. My enemies can just wait to attack me, or the high crime, the people who, the criminals criminals will attack me exactly in those places. I'll get mugged in the parking lot at Dodger Stadium and I'll be helpless. Even though I have a gun license, I won't have my gun with me. Some of those places have a lot of checking, and so you wouldn't be allowed to take the gun into Dodger Stadium. People would know you were unarmed there. That's their argument. That
Sure.
Second Amendment allows his self-protection. It allows you to not only, keep arms at home or in your office, but bear arms, to carry them around concealed in California if you have this gun permit. But these are places where right now, persons with a permit can still take it. The reason I don't think that it's ultimately going to be upheld, I think that the ban will go into effect. We will have the ban, and these people will be banned from taking their guns, even with a permit, into these sensitive places, is that the U.S. Supreme Court talked about those sensitive places. And I got the feeling from the U.S. Supreme Court that the problem in New York was that they wouldn't issue you a permit. It was so hard to have a permit issued. But in the course of that, my recollection is they said that's a different question from where even a person with a permit can take the gun. And I thought they mentioned bars and Yankee Stadium as places you couldn't take a gun. And if my recollection is correct, I think that
that tips their hand. Yeah, that tips their hand. David, we're out of time. Can I just give me 45 seconds on that Alaska Airlines flight? The emergency door, it's called a plug, blah, 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 popped out. It, at 16,000 feet, a bunch of stuff was sucked out. Nobody themselves was sucked out, but apparently it was quite a violent event. Others like it. United Airlines just landing, but without the plug falling out. My question is this. If I wanted to take our next guest, Belinda Waymouth and I were flying somewhere and we had this happened, and we were both traumatized by it. We needed therapy. We wouldn't want to go on a plane again. We legitimately had emotional damage done to us as a result of this event. Could we bring a lawsuit against United or Alaska or Boeing, or might that be possible on a class action basis even?
The airlines have gotten a lot of protections, and so you can't sue the airlines on the same theories that you could sue, let's say I were driving you around, right? And my car was so defective that the door blew out and you were traumatized, maybe in the same way. We were up in the mountains. We went down a scary road. You and Belinda were traumatized, okay? You can't sue the airlines under exactly the same conditions, but certainly you could sue them individually. Belinda could sue them. You could also, some lawyer would probably contact you and try to get you as part of a class. The problem in some of those class actions is that there's fairly minimal damages for each person, and they get criticized because the lawyers make so much money and each class participant gets so little money. But this is one where you would really show your trauma. It might not be a good class action because each person suffered a different kind of trauma. You sat closer to the door. There's a person whose the impact was so great of the wind, his shirt blew off of him. Someone else, their cell phone blew out because whoosh, luckily they were at 16,000 and not at high cruising altitude.
But you're saying that you could actually nibble around a court case.
Oh, sure. People are nibbling, I bet, right now. I bet the class action.
There's some nibbling going on even while we're speaking.
The kings and queens of class action are contacting potential members of the class as we speak, Mark. It's so great David, to be with you. By the way, a shout out to Kim.
Kim, what out? What out with where did Kim go away? What happened to Kim? She's
Well, she doesn't have to be here to have my happy New Year and all the best to her and all of you.
There's
Kim. How are you?
There's Kim. Okay. He was just
Thanks,
giving
David
you a
Katz.
shout out, Kim.
Mwah.
All right.
I love you. Thank you for coming.
Great to be on the show.
I think David likes Kim more than he likes me. I don't mean
No.
I grew up with a really smart sister, super smart. She speaks like 4 languages fluently. She has 3 degrees.
Wow.
She top of her class at Stanford Law, blah, blah, blah. I grew up with that kid, and I know that my parents liked her more than me. I know it. I mean, it's not like and now I'm starting to get that same feeling from David Katz that he likes Kim. Yeah,
you know what they said about the baseball catcher who spoke 10 languages, but he couldn't catch in any of them.
David Katz, thanks, David. Woohoo!
The Mark Thompson Show.
I know. Belinda's angry. I'm going to get an email. How dare you bring me on so late? How about it for a little bit of It's the Planet, Stupid?
The Planet
Earth.
Some call me nature.
I am very passionate about the planet.
Earth.
A living, breathing planet capable of sustaining whatever life forms we see fit to deposit on it.
Spock, judging by the pollution content of the atmosphere, I believe we have arrived.
It's the planet, stupid.
No. It's the planet, stupid.
Our guide for It's the Planet Stupid is Belinda Waymouth. Hi, Belinda. I'm sorry. I want you still to take all the time you want. You have no constraints at all.
I'm not angry with you. I've got my own little nibbling story we're going to get to in a minute with cyanobacteria. But
okay, I know.
So all good.
All right, all good. Let's feel happy. Because I read the chat and of course every little negative thing, so I assume everybody's angry with me. Now let's talk about a couple of stories related to this great place that we live that we're sadly not doing so well by. There's a good story to start with, right?
Yep. Oh, I love the story, and it's about charismatic megafauna, and we human beings love our big furry animals. So why don't we start with tigers?
Okay.
So there has been a win for tigers. They have been caught breeding in a sanctuary in Thailand, which is really big news. So the story of the tiger is it starts out bad and then it's going to get good. So what happened was at the beginning of the 20th century, it was estimated there were 100,000 tigers in the world. And then by 2010, we were down to 3,200 tigers, which is a massive drop. And what happened is the usual story. 95% of their habitat was gone because of habitat destruction, poaching, people after bamboo, blah, 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 blah. So terrible. But it was this big tiger wake-up moment. And what happened was 13 countries that have tigers, ranging through them said, okay, we're going to double the populations of our tigers. And that hasn't quite happened. They're now putting world population at about 5,574, but obviously that could be, changing by the minute. The two countries that have doubled the population are Nepal and India, so shout out to them, they did it. But what happened in Thailand is they've got different areas, sanctuaries that they monitor. And it's not just, that you put in cameras to detect poaching and you stop habitat destruction, going after the bamboo, extending the size of farms, blah, blah, blah. You also have to make sure that the tigers have something to eat. So in Thailand, that's samba deer. So you have to make sure there are enough of their prey animals. And what they spotted this week was these tigers. And at first they thought it was a mother with just 2 cubs. And then they realized it was a mother with 3 cubs. So this is the first time in 10 years of monitoring that they have seen cubs. And this is huge because it means that and you can see they're not teeny. These cubs are 18 months old. And it shows how hard it is to actually get a camera sighting. But what it shows is that their habitat was healthy enough. There was enough food, enough, land area for this mother to be able to do the biz and have 3 babies. So this is big. This is good.
Wow. Michael says, my recently departed mother gave away lots of money to save tigers. Yeah.
Well, look, it paid off. So pretty cool. Pretty cool.
That really is. It's nice to start with some good news. What else do you have for us?
Okay, so this is another good news story, and this is out of Colorado. It's a company called Prometheus Materials, and they have come up with, and this is really cool. And there are lots and lots of companies, by the way, that are working on how do we make a more eco-friendly cement. Because right now, cement it's the Portland cement, and Portland cement, which makes most of the world's concrete. Cement is the gooey stuff that binds together the sand and the stones, and then you get the concrete and, you make all the buildings. And this is huge because concrete creates 8% of our global emissions. It's really big. And the reason why China has, the highest emissions in the world, for, many years now is because of how, the growth of their cities and all the concrete that they're using, roads, buildings, blah, blah, blah. And the estimates are that concrete use is actually going to increase by another 23% by the year 2050. So it's really a big deal to have a concrete that does the opposite of what Portland cement does. What Portland cement does is it takes calcium carbonate and in a very fiery, fossil fuel, carbon spewing process, breaks it down and creates the cement and also a lot of CO2. So what Prometheus is doing is they're using a cyanobacteria, which nibbles the CO2 out of the atmosphere. Cyanobacteria is blue or green algae. So basically, we're talking pond scum. So it takes the CO2 out of the atmosphere and then to breed in these little farms. And then it is turned into this gooey cement. So it's doing the opposite of what these are the building blocks that it makes. It's doing the opposite of what Portland cement does. And this, as I said, because of the vast amounts of concrete that we're already manufacturing. I mean, they say we manufacture enough concrete per week to build a whole Paris or to build a whole other New York. So concrete is huge. And if we can use this kind of concrete, which is doing the opposite, sucking the CO2 out of the atmosphere as opposed to putting more CO2 in, it's a huge environmental win. And there's also a really beautiful ecological symmetry, which I just, have to mention because it's amazing. So billions of years ago, cyanobacteria, when it started photosynthesizing, taking CO2 out of the atmosphere and creating oxygen, it made life on Earth possible for other species, such as ourselves. And now it could be going to do the same again by sucking the excess CO2 that we're putting up into this, the atmosphere and making the planet not so hospitable. It could be helping mitigate that. So I think.
Wow. What an exciting piece of news. It's really cool that you have two really positive news stories to kick us off. Is the momentum behind this new kind of consistency, there's momentum to do more of this, yes?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, so this came out of Colorado University. It's, civil engineering and biochemistry. They're getting funding. And they're not the only organization that are making a bio-concrete alternative to, or bio cement as an alternative to Portland cement. So, yeah, it's really big. And it's one of those innovations that just makes so much sense,
Yeah,
and it comes from a bacteria, that is in the, that we have anyway. I mean, let's put pond scum to use. Let's put all that algae that, that we're creating by the eutrophication of our rivers and lakes. Let's put
pond scum to use. Yes. All right. Now, who is it? Somebody said something very funny. I thought it was clever anyway. It was Edward Lee. Okay, let's get to the doom and gloom. All right, so that you've given us the positive.
Yeah. Well, I do. There are more positive things. I mean, Biden announced this week that there are going to be 7,500 more EV charging stations over 22 states. They're putting a $623 million chunk of money into more and more EV stations. When Biden came into office, we had a very small sort of network federally, and now we're up to 170,000 EV charging stations, and his goal is to get us to 500,000. So
yeah, and that's such a cool thing that you mentioned, the expansion. And two things have to happen. That network has to expand, as you just mentioned, it is expanding. And then, of course, the vehicles have to be, for at least consumers, rechargeable in a timely way, right? Because the one thing that I'd suggest that these combustion engines have going for them is that they pull in and 5 minutes later they're full of gas, right? And they can take off. I have to pull my EV in, and it may take, by the way, you can do it. Sometimes you only have to stop for 10 minutes or something. It's not like a huge commitment of time, but if you want to fill it up and you're going in on E, then it can be a more substantial. Again, it's still not an hour or anything, but it can be a lot. So, but it's great that they're expanding that network because you can't have one without the other. You can't just get an EV in every driveway without a way to charge it up.
Yeah. And the other cool thing that's happened is, there used to be this really proprietorial thing. Every car manufacturer, GM, Ford, they had their own charger. So you could only charge with their charging system. Well, now they're all going to, they've said, okay, we will use the Tesla one. And yeah, Elon Musk will make more money. But if you have a universal charger that everybody, can use, and hopefully if Elon Musk is on it, he'll, reduce the charging time for people. I mean, I would say, Mark, when you pull in to recharge, read a book, do a little meditation.
Oh, sure. No, I love it. I love the downtime. Yeah. Get out of the car, walk around,
Exactly. Well, maybe not for you, but I'll say this for every, this could be a little bit of me time, just to, put my positive spin on it, because I can't help it.
Yes, I know. Well, I will, by the way, ding proprietorial, never used before on this show, the first ever use of the word proprietorial. And I know you're saying, well, is that really a word, proprietorial? I mean, isn't proprietary the word? No, proprietorial is a word. And Belinda, bravo for using it first on the show.
Well, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
So that's
doom and gloom?
That's a little bit of, and you get nothing for it.
You get
nothing. The idea, though, that you've had 3 solid environmental positive stories is really, it's thrown me off my game.
Yeah,
I don't know what.
Sorry, I know. You're really destabilized, right?
Where's the end of the planet story that I usually get?
Yeah, it's coming. It's coming.
Okay,
Never
great.
fear.
Please
Tomorrow.
continue. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so the next couple of things I want to talk about are plastics, and this is for Kim, because she, like me, very concerned about plastics and what they're doing in the environment. And there were
Kim, this is for you if you're with us. Okay.
You, Kim. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Because
How are you?
I'm going to bring in a solution at the end for one of them. Now, the first one, I've talked about this before on the show. It's ridiculous that we drink water out of plastic bottles. We didn't have them in our childhood. Were you running around dehydrated, either of you? I wasn't. There was a garden hose, there was a tap, faucet. There was, I could get water when I needed it. So this con job that has been done on, the entire global population, that we all feel like we have to be walking around with, great big bottle, plastic bottle of water. So here's the thing. We know that there's there's plastic in those water bottles. Lots of studies have shown us there are microplastics, they're bad, blah, 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 blah. There was one that found a Nestle bottle had 10,000 microplastics in it, one bottle of water. And here's the thing that I just want to break this down for everybody. Plastic is like our skin. It's sloughing off little bits all the time. So what scientists have now discovered is it's not the microplastics in bottles of water, it's nanoplastics. Now, nanoplastics are teeny tiny. I mean, way tinier than a microplastic. They're, if you can imagine, 1/70th the width of a human strand of hair. So they're absolutely tiny. And what they're finding is there are 100 to 1,000 times more of these nanoplastics in a bottle of water. And they're getting them because the plastic is sloughing off the sides of the bottles. And also there's another plastic called polyamide, which is in a water filter system that the water goes through to be filtered before it gets into your bottle. So
let me guess, that's not good?
Yeah, I mean, hello. So do yourselves a favor, don't drink water out of a plastic bottle. Get your own water bottle and refill it.
Oh my God, you can taste it. You can taste the plastic. You can taste it in the water. It's disgusting.
Gross.
And there are endocrine disruptors, as mentioned, and
and also they get into our blood, and they know that they can get into our brains and our liver. So do yourself a favor and try to cut down on plastic. I mean, the problem is plastic is so ubiquitous. And I'm not saying that to get a ding. I'm just saying it because plastic is everywhere.
Yeah.
But so the other story that I was thinking about this week is, a lot of us, that's a great visualization of it. Right?
We're killing ourselves with it. We're killing ourselves. We're
killing the oceans. We're choking off everything with this stupid. And it's a petroleum based product. Make no mistake about it.
It's a hydrocarbon. It comes from oil.
Right. Sorry, we have another minute or two. Go ahead.
Okay. So then very quickly, I want to get to people using laundry detergents that they think are eco-friendly and good. So people are using those sheets, which they think are just dehydrated soap, and they throw them in. And they're also using things. So my husband got these things. They're those little pods that come in a little. Can you guys see this? So they come in a little,
sure.
Pillowcase for the pod, and that is made out of a plastic called polyvinyl alcohol, and it has been deemed by the EPA to be safe. But what they're finding is that this plastic, which is in the laundry sheets that everyone thinks are so eco, and also in these little pods, it only breaks down in a wastewater treatment facility if there are the right microbes present. And what they're finding is this plastic is in drinking water. It's been found in breast milk. So not as good as we thought it was. And there was one company that, as soon as this research started coming out, True Earth, which had been marketing, their eco-friendly laundry detergent, is plastic-free, took that down off their website. Other bigger manufacturers of laundry detergent aren't, responding, to these guys. And obviously a company like this that wants to be good is going to go, okay, so we can't use, polyvinyl alcohol. It's not okay. I mean, it's listed, on the box of my stuff and as ingredients. So guys, two alternatives. You can go back to the cardboard box with laundry powder.
Yeah, you just pour it in. Right.
Yeah, just pour it in. When I first, was getting cognizant of all the, toxins and barrage of stuff that was coming at me, used these things called soap nuts. They come from Nepal and India. They're actually berries, and you put them in a little linen bag in the washing machine. And when they get in warm water and sort of energized, this it's like a soap comes out of them, and they clean your clothes. My husband didn't trust them. Can you imagine, Mark? Knowing Jake.
So cynical.
Yeah, he was like,
Jake doesn't trust anything.
Don't get the clothes clean. So we're going to use up our box of these guys, and then once they're done,
you're going powder.
I'm going to go to the powder, and I'm going back to soap nuts.
I love. Belinda, I love that you got all of this in such a nice compact segment, and I can't wait to post it for everybody. If anybody missed any of it, we'll drop it as a separate segment. It's the Planet Stupid. Some good news and then some concerning news, but even some things that we can do something about, just even on a consumer level.
Yeah,
so
there are solutions, and we just have to look for them and push for them. And I love the our audience member who talked about his mum giving money to save the tigers, because look, the tigers are being saved. I mean, it's that's
it really works. Yeah. Then there's an urgency to all of this. So all right, Belinda, you can find her on social media. Belinda Waymouth, Waymouth. Thank you, Belinda. It's the Planet Stupid for today.
More.
It's the Planet Stupid.
No, it's the Planet Stupid.
Next time, only on The Mark Thompson Show.
I can't believe it, Albert. Say it ain't so. We've got to wrap up. I got some cool contributors who jumped into the chat, I noticed. Can I give them a little love? Albert Luis says, this is to celebrate all the good news stories from Belinda. I'm ready to go find an after party now to celebrate. The after party live is starting. Yeah, so that's cool.
And we'll do it live.
Luis, thank you. Big shout out. You're a big supporter. I so appreciate everybody who supports our show. Kim is next over on the After Party Live channel. Thanks to David Katz. Thanks to Belinda. Thanks to all of you for being here and helping us get to over 19,000 subs. Please share the show. We have shorts. We have videos of David Katz. The David Katz video is dropped separately, and you should share it on Facebook or wherever you do your social media. Tomorrow, big
I'm
show.
Shadow Stevens for The Mark Thompson Show.
Friday, Fabulous Florida, Politics with Michael Schur. And, of course, Snyder on movies. Till then, bye-bye.